In the first century, crucifixion was a method of execution used by the Roman state for individuals considered threats to public order. It was reserved for rebels, insurgents, and enemies of the empire, not for disputes over religious belief. Yet this was the method used to execute Jesus of Nazareth. To understand why, the event must be examined within the political and economic realities of Roman Judea. Historical records of the Roman Empire reveal a precise pattern regarding capital punishment. Rome did not utilize crucifixion for local religious disputes or petty theft. It was an expensive, public mechanism of state terror reserved exclusively for pirates, rebellious slaves, and enemies of the state. It served as the absolute penalty for sedition. Yet in the first century, the Roman military and a wealthy local aristocracy colluded to execute a carpenter from a northern town using this exact method. Understanding this execution requires examining the geopolitical reality of first-century Judea. By the year 30 AD, Judea was a volatile, occupied Roman province. The overarching foreign policy was the Pax Romana, maintained through military suppression and the extraction of wealth. The Jewish peasant class operated under a dual taxation system. They paid civil taxes, land taxes, and tolls directly to Rome, while simultaneously paying tithes and a half-shekel temple tax to the local religious elite. Modern scholars estimate the combined tax burden stripped away 30 to 40% of a peasant's agricultural yield. This extraction of wealth drove families into default, forcing the sale of ancestral land and pushing the working class into poverty. These economic conditions fostered four distinct political factions. The Essenes viewed the system as corrupt and abandoned society, withdrawing to the desert. The Zealots were violent insurgents who viewed paying taxes to Rome as treason, engaging in guerrilla warfare and political assassinations. The Pharisees were cultural preservationists who opposed Roman occupation but believed strict adherence to ancient laws would prompt divine intervention. The fourth faction, the Sadducees, were the wealthy, aristocratic priestly class and Roman collaborators. Their primary motivation was maintaining the status quo, protecting their wealth, and keeping the treaty with Rome intact. The center of their power was the Second Temple in Jerusalem. The temple was not merely a religious center, it functioned as the central bank, the national treasury, and the seat of the local government, known as the Sanhedrin. As the primary economic engine of the region, the Sadducees controlled the currency exchange and held a monopoly on the sacrificial animal trade. Controlling the temple meant controlling the nation. The Roman military recognized this infrastructure. They constructed the Antonia Fortress, directly attached to the northwest corner of the Temple Mount. Soldiers stood on the walls overlooking the courtyards, monitoring the financial exchanges and watching for riots. During the spring of the year 30, the region observed Passover. This annual festival celebrated historical liberation from Egypt. During this week, the population of Jerusalem swelled from roughly 30,000 to over 150,000 people. Nationalistic fervor reached its peak. The Roman military operated on high alert, heavily reinforcing the local garrison. Under these militarized conditions, Jesus of Nazareth entered the city. He arrived from the Mount of Olives, a route historically associated with the arrival of a conquering king. Crowds waved palm branches, a recognized first-century symbol of Jewish nationalism and rebellion. The title the crowds used, Messiah or Christos in Greek, was a political and military designation. In the first century, it identified a sovereign king expected to overthrow foreign rule. This demonstration triggered a national security crisis. Jesus then entered the temple complex. By overturning the tables of the money changers, he attacked the central bank. Driving out the merchants and halting the flow of currency temporarily shut down the economic machinery of the nation. This direct action disrupted the core of the Sadducees' wealth, while heavily armed Roman soldiers observed from the walls above. The religious elite faced an immediate geopolitical calculation. The Gospel of John, chapter 11, records the emergency meeting of the Sanhedrin. The recorded dialogue focuses entirely on geopolitical reality rather than theology or blasphemy. The leadership stated, "What are we accomplishing? Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." John chapter 11, verse 47 to 48. This indicates the primary concern was national security. The elite understood that a populist uprising during Passover would prompt a Roman military response from the Antonia fortress. Rome would likely destroy the temple, stripping the Sadducees of their wealth and political power. The high priest, Caiaphas, concluded the debate with political logic. "It is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." Jesus was sacrificed as a political mechanism to appease Roman authorities. The elite arrested him at night to avoid inciting a public riot. Upon handing him over to the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, they altered the formal charge to sedition. They stated, "We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king." Pilate recognized that Jesus did not fit the profile of a standard violent revolutionary. However, the elite threatened to report Pilate to the emperor for harboring a traitor. Pilate chose political expediency and ordered the execution. The Roman historian Tacitus and the Jewish historian Josephus recorded the event as a state execution. The two men crucified beside him are frequently translated as thieves, but the original Greek text uses the word listes, the terminology Rome used for violent political insurgents. Jesus was executed among anti-Roman insurgents under a sign reading, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." The execution served to protect the local economic system and maintain the Pax Romana. The religious elite calculated that this execution would save their temple and nation from Roman destruction. 40 years later, in the year 70 AD, decades of taxation and economic exploitation culminated in the First Jewish-Roman War. The Roman army laid siege to Jerusalem and burned the Second Temple to the ground. The specific outcome the elite attempted to prevent ultimately occurred, and the local system collapsed. So why was Jesus killed? Not simply because of religion, but because of what he represented in that moment, a perceived king in a land occupied by an empire during a volatile festival, surrounded by crowds, in a system desperate to maintain control. From Rome's perspective, he was a potential insurgent. From the leader's perspective, he was a dangerous spark. And in a world where power must be preserved at all costs, that is more than enough reason to put a man on a cross. Documenting this political framework does not remove the theological significance of the crucifixion. It places that theology within the historical conditions in which it occurred, where governance, economic pressure, and institutional authority shaped the outcome. If this analysis has changed how you understand the events around the crucifixion, consider liking and subscribing to follow future investigations as we continue examining the systems around Scripture. I will see you in the next investigation.